Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar with Margot Note. My name is Bradley, and I will be your moderator for this webinar titled Harnessing Marketing Strategies for Archival Services. Before we start, I would like to provide some information about our company and introduce today's presenter. Lucidea is a software developing company specialized in museum and archival collections management solutions, as well as knowledge management and library automation systems. Our brands include Sydney, Presto, Argus, Archivera, Eloquent, and Quadrastar. Now I would like to take a moment to introduce today's presenter, Margot Note. Margot Note is an author, archivist, and records manager, helping individuals and organizations harness their history. As the principal of Margot Note Consulting LLC, she facilitates the understanding of the importance of unique collections, suggesting ways to manage them and use them to tell stories to connect with people. She is also a popular guest author for Lucidea's Think Clearly blog and has provided us with many great webinars that are listed on our website. So please feel free to check those out after today's session. Take it away, Margot.
Thank you so much. So part of this series and talking about how to advocate to an internal audience for archivists is one, I think, important puzzle piece is marketing. And marketing, of course, promotes services and it emphasizes organizational importance. So in this case, when you're talking about your archives department, you're really putting some messaging out there to your colleagues about how your archives serves the institutional needs, the institutional mission of what you're doing and why you're there. I think, I feel like I say this in every webinar. I feel a lot of times archivists and maybe other people in kind of information professional type roles within an organization, let's say librarians or information governance professionals. I think a lot of times we have to kind of justify our work and really explain why we're here. And I think marketing is a really important way to do that, to actively and proactively think about the messaging that you can put out there to educate your colleagues about what you do, because depending on people's educational background or academic levels that they got to or interests, they might not even understand or really might not understand archives or really what we can do to help them in their daily work when you're in archives within an institution. So modern marketing is not solely commercial. I think, obviously when we think about marketing, we think about marketing campaigns, campaigns, kind of Mad Men, trying to, sometimes it has a negative connotation where someone's trying to kind of steamroll you into doing something and kind of push you into buying a product or something that you don't need. Now we're really thinking about kind of social influencers and people on Instagram and TikTok pushing products. But marketing in this case is really talking about customer focused service delivery. As archivists, we are customer service experts because the archives exist for people to use them. They don't just exist just because. It's really something that, there's an important reason why we do the work that we do. So marketing links between producers and consumers. So in this case, the producer might be the institutional records of the organization. The consumers are, let's say, your internal marketing team, communications team, programs, people in the C-suite, people in fundraising, for example. So marketing and kind of putting a message out there about archives really allows the archivist and your archival team to connect with your colleagues and really talk about kind of user-centric services that you can help them do the work that they need to do. And that's kind of a two-way street as well, because I think what I found in past positions is when I've helped colleagues find information and they can see that I can, once I have the materials, they're easy to find those materials and get that information for me. From me, they're more likely to give over those materials as well. So it is a two-way street where, you can help them, but they can also help you as well. And you really, I think as an archivist, you really have to be proactive about that messaging because not everyone is going to understand it or care to understand it. So marketing in this case is really about strategic communication. So crafting compelling narratives, and I'll walk through some scenarios that are kind of talking points that you can figure out, and then communicating the relevance of the services that you do. So I know a couple of years ago, probably quite a while ago, Society of American Archivists had a real push about advocacy, and they were talking about like your elevator pitch. So if you had, 3 minutes in an elevator with someone important with your organization, how would you explain that the work that you're doing? And I think that's one piece is to think about what is kind of a bite-size soundbite of what you do. And maybe I think it's archivists in general, but I know specifically me, I like to get into the weeds. I like to explain the metadata and I get into the jargon, and I find people's eyes kind of glazing over. So I think it's really important to find that level of talking about what you do in a way that connects with people. And that's a muscle that has to be developed. Unless you're a really charismatic person, it's sometimes hard sometimes hard to think kind of off the cuff. So I always like to have kind of a few running lines in the back of my head, kind of explaining that the work that I do, and finding opportunities to talk about the type of work I do as an archivist and an archives consultant. So thinking about the strategic communication, there's kind of what I call tales of transformation. So thinking about, I think we have to get away from archives are important because they're historically valuable, or there's like a value in the stuff. I mean, that is true. That I'm the first to admit that is true, and that's one of the reasons I'm interested in archives, and I imagine a lot of people are in archives because it is important to preserve these materials for all the different, informational, evidential, aesthetic reasons, historic reasons, fiscal reasons. They might be very valuable. But I think kind of getting beyond kind of thinking that way, and thinking about how can having these archives, or how can the stories that are held within the archives really demonstrate transformation and demonstrate results, especially if you're talking to decision makers and they care about results. They care about, they want to see some tangible results. So I think it's always important to kind of start with the origin story, like why were the archives developed, kind of share the background and early influences. I think the origin story is really important because it shows a certain maturity of the organization when they start thinking about their holdings and they start thinking about things as archives. I'm working with a client right now that we're working in kind of it's being called knowledge management, but it's kind of a mix between archives, information management, information governance, and it's kind of a flexible, really interesting and new position with the organization. And I think part of the reason, the origin story of why they have this department, why they're going to hire this person, is that the organization itself, this charitable trust, has transformed so much and they've matured so much that they can think backwards on their history and also kind of move forward about all the amount of information and knowledge that they're generating. So that's a really important talking point that I use, I think, sometimes with talking with organizations, that it shows a level of complexity, maturity that you're thinking about developing in archives. We really want to think also about key accomplishments. So thinking about an impactful project or projects within the organization, and also within the archives department too. So if you were thinking back of the key accomplishments that your department has done, what's the highlight reel? What would be the top 3 things that you did that made a big change for people, that impacted people? Was it processing all the backlogs, so you had everything available? Was it digitizing key holdings of your archives? Was it acquiring a collection that brought researchers into your organization? And it can be something that, I mean, it's also what you think is a key accomplishment, but it was also a key accomplishment to your colleagues too. I remember at one position I had that it was almost like the finance team, and I get it because archives cost money. They don't necessarily generate money. But the finance team just seemed like they did not understand anything that I was doing, and and I had a shoestring budget, and I was not really asking for much, and so much was supplemented by really great grants. But I remember the way that I won this over this finance team, and they loved me afterwards. They didn't understand anything that I was doing, but I had digitized all their audits, all their like IRS 990 forms, and all those kind of key information that they needed. And it basically took me less than an afternoon to do a couple, like maybe 3 hours at the scanner to digitize the copies, make them into PDFs, rename them and put them in a folder. And it was like, after that, I felt like I walked on water. And so that was, I would never have thought that that had mattered. But once I did that, they saw me as an ally, and they were much kinder to me, at least for a period of time. So it is kind of funny how, for me, that was no big deal. But for them, it was totally, they loved me forever after that. So it is really interesting to see maybe what you as an archivist think is a key accomplishment versus people that, let's say, the CFO thinks is a key accomplishment. So just keep that in mind too, because a little bit of marketing is thinking about what's important to you, but also thinking about what's important to the consumer is the most important thing. The consumer, the colleague, the users of your service or your product, which is archives. And then thinking about challenges that were overcome by the archives. So what was something huge that happened with the archives, and what was kind of the hero's tale of how you took over or changed something? For me, one key project or challenge that I had was when I first came onto a position, there was just a tremendous backlog of materials, and the office I moved into just looked like Iron Mountain, like exploded. Like there was boxes everywhere. There was no order. It was completely chaotic, and it was just, you'd go in that room and just, it just felt awful, and it felt like there was no control. And so the big challenge that I overcame is going into that room and really either processing the collections, getting them into offsite storage, getting them to in-site storage that needed to be done, or really inventorying what was there and cleaning it up and making it so that it looked like a welcoming space and that people could find things. And that was a tremendous moment, because once I was able to get rid of that backlog, and I think it took me maybe 6 months. I mean, I was really hammering away at it because I was on a mission. It seemed like, again, that kind of opened up the space and opened up colleagues to give me more of their materials. This was institutional archives. And so there was a level of trust, because people no longer thought of the archives as some black box that you could give stuff. They're asking for stuff. Like someone in the previous position obviously was asking for those materials, but why would anyone in their right mind give over materials if it looked like they were swimming in boxes? So that was one of kind of the tales of transformation that I used to try to market my services better within the organization. And then I think another important part is tales of transformation is thinking about leadership. So really thinking about, what are collaboration skills? What are ways that you as an archivist can have a little bit of a higher profile within the organization? How can you help colleagues? And there's certain departments, depending on the organization that you have, that it would make sense for you to reach out to. For instance, any type of, if you have an organization that has a marketing or communications team, a social media team, if you have someone like a COO that's looking for materials, or the development or fundraising office, if there's a big like milestone happening, or some type of anniversary, or someone's retiring, there's a change in positions, for example. These are real opportunities that you can reach out and help people, and for them addressing what they need to do, like if they're creating a new brochure or a new capital campaign, or if they're creating some type of publication or reaching out to a donor, you can give them some information that can help them. Another thing is also thinking about setbacks. So is there, and sometimes talking about failures, I think is really important too. So was there a project that didn't go so well, and then how did you fix it, or what did you learn from it? So really thinking about kind of an unexpected learning process, like maybe you thought, this is really going to be the project that people really cared about, but it turned out to be this project in the archives. Thinking about innovation. So what's an instance of driving change? What's something that because you're the archivist and there's an archives, we were able to do this, whereas before we weren't able to do. An example I can think of at an organization where there was a refreshing of the website. And so and it was an organization that had a lot of different like programs and a lot of grant funded programs. So they needed to show kind of the work that they did and then have some language about what they did. And a lot of it was driven by images, like architecture images and images of landscapes and kind of very visual um, pieces of history. But what they had before on the website wasn't all that great. It was either stock photography or kind of low grain images. So, and this was kind of in sync with kind of right before this website refresh. We had gotten a nice big grant to do some digitization of the photo archives. So because there was all these new photo archives, things that used to be like tucked away in like a slide binder somewhere, these beautiful pictures and stuff that showed actually the conservation work and the work that we were doing. Now we had a whole slew of beautiful images that was able to take the website to a whole different level. And that would not have been possible without the archives. It would have, I guess they would have just had to use some really stale looking, stock photography. The archives really could tell the story of the organization in a visual way that they weren't able to do before. And that was purely because of the archives, because of my labor, and because of this grant money that was gotten. And then aspirations, discussing the goals and steps towards achievement. So thinking about, having a vision for the archive. So what you're doing now versus what you would like the archives to look in the future, and how the archives will kind of grow as the organization grows and keeps on supporting the archive. So these are, just a handful of tales of transformation, just to keep in your kind of the back of your mind. So when there's opportunities to talk about archives, especially to people that are new or looking for your services within your organization, you can kind of talk about these things off the top of your head. And a big part of archives too is content creation. So it's really a cornerstone. I mean, we have the primary sources. I'm amazed by, I'm a huge documentary buff and a documentary series, and I've seen probably every true crime documentary you can think of, or anything that has like some weirdness to it, some type of conspiracy, or I don't know, some odd, I'm an odd documentary buff. And I'm always surprised by how much of kind of media is being created by old archives, old audio tapes, old, things these primary sources that we have. So I think there's a lot of content creation that can be created with archives. So really diving into the archives for rich heritage. So I think kind of even before you do that is really getting a sense of, do you have a baseline level of understanding of your holdings? Not everyone does, unfortunately, and I think that's where you need to start, is really getting a sense of kind of a box level inventory or a digital inventory of what you have, and then using that inventory to be kind of curious about kind of diving deeper into those materials. And we're really thinking about leveraging a mode of impact and fostering a connection with the collections. So that could be visual archives, any type of photo archives, anything that has some type of aesthetic point of view. Are there things within the archives that have some type of a mode of impact? I mean, good or bad? I mean, you have to kind of balance that sensitivity to make sure you're being culturally sensitive and being sensitive in general to the materials that you have, right? So really thinking about especially the unexplored pieces of your collections. What do you have that people, your colleagues, would be really interested in knowing that you have, that you can help them with the work that they're doing. And thinking about marketing as well, kind of thinking about the messaging that you're giving about archives, is Allowing yourself a little bit of thinking time to think about the strengths and weaknesses that characterize your archives, both the strengths and weaknesses that you perceive as an archivist or a part of an archives team, because obviously you're the subject matter experts, you know these archives more than anyone else. I think it's also thinking about what people outside of the archives perceive as strengths and weaknesses, whether, right, wrong, and different. I mean, that's their perception too. And part of marketing is mitigating and managing that perception. So, and that matters. A lot of times the perception of the archives matters more than the archives, unfortunately, but that's a truth and reality that we live with. So having that assessment of what are we doing right? What is our weaknesses? What do we really need to work on? And then thinking about how you can capitalize on opportunities and mitigate strengths. So, I'm kind of in both fields of kind of being a well-rounded archives in the sense that you have your strengths and you try to kind of mitigate those weaknesses. I also think that sometimes it's okay to really maximize your strengths. I think as long as you're aware of your weaknesses, there might be some weaknesses but there might be weaknesses that are something that you really do, you can't just ignore, and that's based more on perception. But a lot of time, the weaknesses that you have I think the weaknesses that you think that you have as an archives, maybe people outside of the archives department might not necessarily see, but it's thinking about what do they perceive as the weaknesses and how can you target that in some of your strategy moving forward. So in marketing your archival services, you're thinking about your core offerings. So what are the primary benefits offered by the archives that people that you see colleagues are asking you for or know that you have that they understand well? What are users seeking and how does the archive satisfy those needs? So getting a sense of what are kind of the information queries, and even like sometimes it's really having almost a reference interview with colleagues, because how people think about archives and what they're asking isn't necessarily what they want because they don't have the language. I was talking to someone recently about, I used to have, and I haven't heard it in a long time, I used to have people reach out to me as a consultant and say, I want you to digitize my archives. And so that was kind of the query that they would send me, and they wanted a meeting. And I kept on thinking, well, I'm obviously not a digitization vendor. I don't market myself that way. I don't have the facility. I don't want to get into that business. I can facilitate it with vendors that I use, but I don't do it myself. And I was thinking, okay, why are people asking me this? Like, what do they mean by that? And I was taking them quite literally. But they really meant by, I want you to digitize my archives or digitize my collection. They really meant, I want you to organize my archives, or I want kind of archival services, but they didn't know how to articulate it because they didn't have the language. And so that was, for them, that was purely an opening to a really interesting conversation. And then to having several different clients, it came to me kind of in that indirect route. But that's kind of thinking about talking with your colleagues and being curious about what they think you have and how they think you can help you and help educate them too. And giving them the possibilities. Like, again, when I was talking about my client that I'm working with them to set up this knowledge management position, there's been a lot of internal kind of socialization about what does this actually mean and like what will this role do. And I don't necessarily have the answers to that right now. I have some idea, but I'm an outsider looking in, but it's thinking about, and what I was trying to say is like once kind of the easy things are cataloged and organized, then there's going to be other opportunities to fill in those gaps. So like to tie back to this core offerings, once users are aware of kind of the things that you can do, it'll start putting ideas in their mind. So they'll be generating ideas and giving you kind of potential service areas that you can help them with. It's just a matter of them kind of getting to know each other and building a relationship with your colleagues, and that kind of naturally grows out of this curiosity. And then that can result in kind of different types of services or offerings that you have for them. And then what benefits accrue when users utilize the archive? So there's obviously benefits that benefit the users. So hopefully they're doing their work faster, more efficient. It's easier for them. It's more fun, less laborious. They're building a relationship with you. They're getting the word out about how fabulous the archives are. They're building trust with you. So if they have materials that they want to give you, or they're aware of other people that have materials that should be in the archives, they're starting that conversation. And then it also benefits the archives. I mean, the more users that you can help, the more people see you as a service and a way that you can help them do the work. And the more that you're kind of tied into the operations and projects of your organization, the more security that you have in a pretty precarious field. So I think it's always good to really think about how are we benefiting the users and benefiting the archives when we are marketing a lot of our core offerings. So thinking about user satisfaction. So what tangible items do users perceive when receiving services? So thinking about kind of when people, let's say, search in, maybe you have a database of your archival holdings, or maybe it's something like an intranet, something they're looking online, or a finding aid, or if they're emailing you, and you're doing that work, let's say with your own spreadsheet or Access database or whatever you're using in the back end. What is the experience like for users? Does it seem like they are getting good service, warm service? Does it seem like it's all automated? Is there a coldness to it? Is there, do they feel like they have a sense of what they're asking for is important? Are they taken seriously? How do people feel when they're asking you for help? And it's really thinking about how can you be a welcoming force for people to ask questions, because again, it is very hard for people to ask for help. They sometimes don't want to bother you. Sometimes if they're working remotely, it seems like, we're eons away from each other. Sometimes people feel like they're asking a silly question, or they feel like, oh, I should know this, So it's really making sure that when people receive your services, there's a level of customer service to that interaction that they feel like they're taken care of. What archival personnel do users contact for services? So those types of, who are they interacting with, and what is that? How does that feel like to use those services? I was thinking about a client that I had, and luckily this staff person transferred to another part of this library system, but they would have someone that was working kind of in an archival, kind of a public facing local history type archives position. And sometimes it would be really, there's perception it was really cliquey. It was really like you had to be an insider to like use these services. And there was something there's something kind of unwelcoming, let's say, about how this long-standing person at this position was. And I think part of it was that they've been there forever. They were very familiar with the people that use the archives all the long time. They did not want to change their ways, but it gave a perception, unfortunately, of that local history / archives repository as being really unwelcoming to new people, and that word got out, and it was really unfortunate. And part of my work with this is kind of a long time project, but kind of a needs assessment that I did was kind of looking at how did users, especially new users, like what was their, it's almost like a mystery shopper experience. Like what was their experience using and physically entering this room, and also what it looked like on the website. And luckily this person moved on to another position. And I mean, that's always good when there's kind of a transition of colleagues, because you could have a new experience. And now the people that are greeting, the public facing people within that department, are very welcoming, come from more of a librarian, like a public librarian type of background. And so they are very warm, very inquisitive, very friendly. They're naturally kind of extroverted too, which is good. So people feel they feel good when they use these services. They don't feel foolish. They feel like they're taken care of. And I think that really was starting to slowly change the perception, and kind of word got out about that in a good way too, that, okay, there's new things happening within this department. And then thinking about what technology is employed and how do archival services function. So thinking about um, how clunky, like how elegant is the process of finding information? Is it clunky? Do you need, and this is kind of a bigger question, do you need better software? Do you need a better workflow? Is there a way that you can even make like your website look nicer, or things look more cohesive? Um, really thinking about what does that, how is the technology, or how does kind of remote services work for users as well? So thinking about your colleagues that, you know, might need a question right away. They don't necessarily want to bother you, for example, but are there ways that they can kind of do self-service within the archives too? Is that possible? Is there a way to digitize, let's say, materials that are always asked about, and have them available so people don't have to search around for them? You know, just really thinking about what are ways that you can, um, you know, help with user satisfaction. Quality assurance is thinking about what are steps taken to ensure quality in delivering services, and what must users do or know to have the best experience. So thinking again back to that user satisfaction, is that, do people feel like they're having a quality interaction? Are, you know, do people, I think this, unfortunately, I see this happen sometimes with, because archives tend to be understaffed and there's so much work to do, that it's almost like you get overwhelmed with this stuff. And then when you're dealing with people, it seems like the people are in the way. I mean, I've been totally guilty of this myself, where, you know, I want to process everything, and then I'm like, oh wait, I have to deal with the colleagues. Well, the colleagues come first. Um, but sometimes it's hard when you're completely stressed out with doing a million things at once. So are there ways to think about how you can ensure quality, to make sure that people are having a good experience? Like, what, really thinking about what does that kind of users either emailing you or coming in the door or knocking on your office door, like what, how can they have a quality experience? And then what do they need to know or do to have a better experience? So is there information that's kind of obvious but needs to be written down somewhere? Just helping people to feel like they're educated and taken care of. So thinking about your kind of marketing plan, and this is kind of a soft marketing plan that you're doing, but thinking about what resources are needed to deliver archival services, and what are the goals and objectives of the marketing plan. So thinking about how you're going to, the messaging and the marketing that you're going to have within your organization. So there might be a certain level of messaging to the whole organization, and might be to certain departments, and might be to specific colleagues within your departments, but taking a step back and really thinking about what that's going to look like, and what resources do you need to do that and make that a quality interaction. We're thinking about who are the target audiences for the archives? How can they be segmented and prioritized? What are the key messages that the archives wants to communicate? What are the best channels and tools to reach colleagues? And how will they be integrated and coordinated? So thinking about, okay, this is a strategy. We're going to talk about the archives. How are we going to slice and dice this audience? And I was thinking about, when I was kind of writing this slide, is a client that I had that was at a university, and they've been there for quite a while, but it was like they had some relationships with some departments and not the best relationships with other departments. And there was places that they really could have reached out more to. So we really kind of took a step back, and we thought about, okay, what are the different audiences and who do we want to specifically target, and really making a schedule that it was like, okay, every month I'm going to reach out to this. This is at a university. I'm going to reach out to this department head or this particular professor or this set of deans or faculty members or however you want to slice and dice it, and tell them about the archives and welcome them to the archives. Or, before the school year, sometime in kind of late summer, we're going to shoot an email about archives and what we can offer them as faculty members and their students, and how can we reach out to, let's say, development when whatever time they were planning their kind of fundraising goals for the year, and like how the archives could help support them, and some of their kind of donor cultivation. So really thinking about strategically who are the people that we want to reach out to, and having almost a schedule, like having something in your calendar to say, okay, this is the time, maybe this is the quarter that I work on these people. Maybe this is time I haven't reached out to this person in a couple of months. Let me just reach out to them. We have a new collection that we just got that we're really excited about. Let's, ask people to take a look at it or to let them know, and just constantly like really thinking about almost like a marketing calendar that a marketer would use, about how would you reach out to people and communicate with them, and what kind of messaging and strategy would you use. So what are the resources available for marketing? How will marketing be implemented, monitored, and evaluated? And what are the potential challenges that could affect marketing? So in this case, when you're marketing within an organization, I mean, sometimes you only have to use email, for example, or if you're in committees or some type of standing meetings with people, that's kind of an excellent way to reach out to people. And really think about it. I mean, it's really tied to the type of organization that you're part of, but really taking a step back and thinking about how you're going to manage the communication that you're doing to kind of market your services. And there are different types of communication tools. I mean, it could be something like blog posts, videos, or infographics that you can use internally. You can do workshops, lunch and learns, or sometimes like a fun thing to do to schedule. You can do webinars if let's say you're using a new type of database, or you want people to be able to educate themselves. I think it's also a good old just saying hi to people, having lunch with people, having a quick email or a quick Zoom meeting. I mean, there's all different ways that you can connect with people, and it's really thinking about what you can do that has the maximum impact and what's going to be the most well received by other people as well. So you want to match the message. So we want to tailor to the audience needs and preferences. You're aligning the tools with the message nature and expectations, and assessing urgency. So especially if there are videos, and let's say you can create, let's say, videos on how to use some type of new database or services that you have. That could be something that is kind of standby on your intranet or somewhere where people can take a look at it when they need it. It's kind of just in time communication. And then there's other ways that you would want to talk to people in a meeting or email them at specific times, and really aligning what you're doing with what makes sense with kind of their needs and what their kind of cadence is for the information. We want to have consistent messaging, so matching the tools with the type. So letters, memos, letters, videos, using appropriate channels for engagement, and maintaining consistent messaging. So in this case, you're thinking about, is it good enough? Like sometimes you just have to send a memo, or sometimes you just have to, like what I was saying, like these kind of just-in-time videos that you like. If someone has like a workflow or something that they use the archives, like how can you create content that they can look at it right away? And just being really consistent about what you're saying and how you're messaging. So it can be dependable. Showing results in your communication looks about kind of highlighting the impacts that you've done, looking at case studies. So going back to those kind of tales of transformation, thinking about, are there instances where you've really helped department over a long period of time, and that could be part of your marketing as well. I'm thinking about cost savings. How has working with the archives saved money, saved labor costs, saved money, reduced the time, for example, and then quantifying achievements. So really saying, what has working with the archives, how has it helped people over time? And then part of marketing also is adaptation and feedback. So you're adapting to staying relevant. So you're seeking feedback for kind of the messaging and the marketing that you're doing. You're fostering open communication so colleagues feel that they can ask you questions, they can get information. And it's really thinking about tailoring services to evolving needs. So thinking about, how can you help people now? How can you, maybe things that have strategies that have worked in the past are no longer necessary, but how can you tailor, what you're doing to help colleagues' information needs at this exact moment and in the near future? That's really what you should be focused on in your marketing. It's also about creating communities. So thinking about kind of well-crafted questions, identifying an audience, the unique value proposition that the archives brings to people's efforts, and tactics to reach users. So building relationships with your colleagues is going to help you internally advocate for your position, for the collections that you have. And it's getting that sense of community, of being a helpful colleague in the work that they do. Archives are also good for fostering appreciation. So thinking about, and this is where I think archives really shine, and this is like when people that are decision makers are really going to care about archives, is thinking about achievements, milestones, anniversaries, which is huge. That's when, 25th anniversary is coming up. We need things from our founding days. People go to the archives. You're strengthening the communal identity within an organization. I think archives, especially I think now that more than ever, we're in organizations where there's a lot of churn of people, and sometimes there's not necessarily a good information transfer, and things kind of change, where I think in the past, for a variety of reasons, it made more sense to stay, where now I think we're in an era of there's not a lot of organizational loyalty, unfortunately. I mean, and that's more talking about the organization than employees. So I think archives are a really important way to strengthen communal identity. To think about, what has this organization done in the past? What are the missions and values of this organization? And really having people understand it especially in kind of the onboarding process of being part of the organization, and then increases support of the organization, but also as the archives will, and having this kind of shared legacy and shared history. Archives also elevate roles. So thinking about strategic communication, content creation, as we talked about before, continuous improvement, and enhancing visibility. So when you're marketing your services, obviously you're getting feedback, so that's going to have that continuous improvement. I think it also makes you more visible. It kind of raises the profile of the archives. Archives have that stereotype of kind of being old and dusty and in the corner, and there's a little bit of truth to that, but and we like to be with our stuff. We like to be with our collections. We like to be in the making order out of chaos. That's what we do really well. But I think sometimes that kind of shrinks us and makes us smaller, where I think when we can do this marketing, when we're putting ourselves out there and advocating for ourselves as archivists and our departments as well, it does enhance the visibility. It kind of raises the profile of both the archivist and the department itself. So this is all about empowering archivists. So embracing marketing techniques, it describes and amplifies impact. Talking about kind of marketing services enhances the value of archival services, because it's educating people about what kind of services are out there. And it really helps contribute to a culture of responsible information management, showing that, the archives exist to serve colleagues, but that colleagues also can benefit the archives as well by also transferring information to the archives. So it's really a two-way street and a win-win scenario all around.
Awesome, Margot. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. And you can now go to our website where you can download a free copy of Margot's new book, Preserve, Promote, Persevere, The Archivist's Guide to Internal Advocacy. And if you'd like to learn more about our archival collections management system called Archivera, please feel free to visit our website to check out that as well. Or you can email us at sales@lucidea.com and we'd be happy to have a chat with you. If you have any more questions on any of our software or our company, our contact details are on the screen. And please stay tuned for more details about this webinar and content related to the series. On behalf of the Lucidea team, I thank you all for attending, and until next time, thank you.